Day 10. All of my fears over the new elderly age sprung on me the previous day were for naught. When I woke up, my body had reverted back to that of my previous self. I examined my reflection, and while my beard that had grown in a matter of hours had stayed, the gray in it and in my hair had remarkably vanished, as if time itself had simply been turned back. Everything in my body felt rejuvenated, better than I had felt in years. Even though I was well kept for my years, age still had a way of creeping up. I even jogged for a short while with my pack on just because I could. Things around me were pleasant, showcasing the vibrant nature, alive and thriving in the spring. Now, with Adara being only a few days' walk away, 5 at most, small homesteads and habitations started becoming much more common. The road also became much more defined due to increased use. Having gone a few days without seeing a soul, I was looking forward to being around people again. Even if I didn't interact with them, it was comforting to know I could find help or companionship should it be needed. There were at least a half dozen people I crossed paths with during the day. Various farmers or simple folk who chose to live a more quiet life compared to the bigger cities. I greeted them all, wishing each prosperity and a good day. As evening came, I walked by a small farmhouse with a couple working on the land, children running madly around in the bushes. Waving, I approached them, and smiling, they waved back in turn. I explained that I was traveling through to Adara, and that if they permitted, I would be greatly appreciative of a place to spend the night. Instantly, they agreed, and before I could even utter my thanks, the mother had called for one of her children, who fetched me some cool water, which I guzzled, sighing with contentment. They told me that they had to finish up their tasks, but that I was free to put my travel things inside and to make myself at home. Inside the earthen house, the air was cool and fragrant, and something was simmering on the cooking fire that smelled divine. After putting my pack down, I had the urge to just sit in one of the many chairs strewn around and rest, but instead, I went outside to offer my services. Before I knew it, I was hunched over the freshly plowed field, depositing worms into the soil at various points. Maybe staying inside was the right choice. From what I was told, not only were the little creatures a great boon to the dirt, but this particular species was vital to grow the signature crop the farm was known for. The type of plant would not grow without the symbiotic partnership of these humble worms. Most of the work was done in silence, each person tackling their own row. Then everyone went inside for dinner, and that was when the real conversation started. Everyone became much more animated and lively in the presence of freshly prepared food. Between the boisterous children and the procession of plates and dishes steaming to the table, I felt as though I were in the heart of a typhoon. A few of the other children sat by, wanting to know what I had seen on my way here. To them, Tenora seemed like a whole world away, even though it could be reached on horseback in less than a week. I shared details about where I had been and what I had seen, sparing some of the details that might disturb some of my younger audience. I produced some small colorful river rocks that glowed with radiance under the lantern light that had been given to me in Nethine. These I gave to the children, who were delighted, immediately secreting them away in special spots around the room. Supper was then served, and I had a delightful time. The food was bountiful, and nobody left the table without their fill. We talked about all manner of things: the planting, how the current council was handling the relations between the cities, my former trade as a scribe, and some of the animals that had been recently seen in these parts now that winter was over. A pair of steins had even been seen, large towering grazers that were revered and only rarely seen due to being solitary creatures, preferring to be alone or occasionally seen with a mate. When all the plates had been shoved back and everyone was leaning in their chairs, the tables were cleared off and a fruit wine was brought out for the adults. It was generous and meaningful to me to be honored with a special drink that was made specifically on the family farm. It was wonderfully crafted, made with some dark fruit and a collection of savory herbs I couldn't quite place. fermenting nicely over the off-season. The generosity of strangers never ceases to amaze me. The hospitality continued to be showered on me until it was time for bed, at which point I was given a thick blanket and a spot next to the embers of the hearth. Warm and comfortable, I fell into an easy sleep. Day 11. In the morning, I ate a quick small meal with the family that had hosted me, helping with a few of the morning chores before heading out. Everyone bid a warm goodbye, and I was told that while I was in Adara, I should look for a cousin of theirs who lived in the city. She was a bit eccentric, but a wholly hospitable person who would be happy to help me get my bearings in the massive city. Giving my thanks, I departed the way I had come. It was nice having peace in the land again. People's hearts were open and generous now, as it was before, instead of the fear and mistrust that conflict brought. The feelings of unity pervaded through all of mankind. It was all a family, the family of humanity. The kingdoms were bountiful and abundant, and all those who perused material gain were rewarded richly, and with it they shared generously with all, not even to quell dire need, of which there was little, but to enhance their communities and the lives of those around them. Even as a scribe, simply copying the words and images created by others, I had been well compensated for my work. And when I began my journey, I was given many gifts and things I would need for travels from friends. There were even a few shop owners who were excited for me after I told my plans, insisting on not charging even after I offered them money. Most people were aware that the gift of life was given equally, and were eager to share in it and pass on that energy. I prayed it was never lost. At some point while walking, I looked behind me and saw a giant dust cloud far off on the horizon. Puzzled, I kept going. Within a short while, the dust had doubled in size and there was a slight tremor in the ground. I could just make out many figures, backdropped by the tan swirling mass of dust, rushing towards me. A few minutes later, I was in the midst of a frantic herd of two-legged beasts darting sporadically forward, a man riding one energetically, keeping them all in something resembling order. I covered my face to protect myself from the onslaught of dirt that was accompanying the ragtag procession. The rider bore down on me at full speed, letting up only a few mere feet away from where I stood, rooted by the spectacle of this manically happy-looking fellow with a funny, fuzzy animal companion glued to his shoulder. He lifted his goggles made out of crystal and lowered his flashy scarf, sticking out his hand and introduced himself as Set. Giving a sharp blast of a small horn he carried, the herd, still restless and fidgeting from their halted rampage, gathered closer around. We exchanged a few short pleasantries, explaining where I was headed, but then I was cut off mid-sentence when Set asked with a wild look in his eye if I had ever ridden a Kudu. I had not, and judging by the windswept look of Set's pet and its brown-black hair, it seemed to be quite a crazy ride. So when he offered with a grin for me to join him for the rest of the day, I agreed, working up my resolve, telling myself I had nothing to lose by saying yes. And after a flurry of instruction, I was sitting over the barren landscape on a twitching creature that has half bird, half lizard. The pointers I got didn't seem to adequately cover all the questions I had popping into my head at a rapid rate. Set asked if I had got it all. I began to raise concern, but before I had completed my thought with a devilish look, Set blew a blast of the horn. The sound of the creatures bolted forward. My heart plunged into my stomach as the inertia whipped my head back. Soon, though, the rush of it had my adrenaline flowing, and I let out a whoop of exhilaration. Set led the charge down a small canyon, the 30-odd beasts falling into a loose, thundering line, leaping over small boulders and occasionally running half on the canyon walls with their flexible hindquarters. Looking over, I saw Set hunched over his mount like a madman, ducking and dodging overhangs with his furry little companion clutched at the fabric on his shoulder, its leg frequently out in space behind its body as it clung on for dear life, though it was chattering loudly with what seemed to be excitement. I couldn't count the miles we traveled like this. The creatures were faster than any horse I had ever ridden, seemingly having an inexhaustible supply of energy. After a while, I began to adapt the pace, loosening my clenched grip and jaw, feeling and moving with the flowing strides of my steed. Late afternoon came, and there was another horn blast. The company of animals and riders wheeled about, coming to an abrupt halt on an open piece of land. We had stopped by an oasis, and while the animals showed no signs of heavy breathing after all their excursion, they crowded around a clear pool, noisily sucking up large quantities of water. We started setting up camp for ourselves while the herd went out foraging. I saw Crudu gobble up a small rodent unlucky enough to wander by. I asked Set how he had got his start in this enterprise. He explained that he had always been a herder. Even at a young age, he had an affinity for animals and a certain understanding. His parents had let him travel abroad with shepherds, well before any of his peers were allowed to. It had just been sheep at that time, but now he explained he was branching out for more thrills and a greater challenge. These creatures were hard but rewarding to work with, which made them rare, but extremely useful and loyal, which made the effort worth it. This herd would be very utilized by their new owners in the western part of the kingdom. We ate a humble meal together before finding our own spaces for the night. Sitting back by the fire, sore and drowsy, I watched as Set opened a small leather case, taking out an ornate kalimba. Sweet melodies emanated from the darkness where he sat, his meerkat swaying in the firelight to the soulful tune. A fitting end to such a wild and hectic day. Day 12. Set and I parted ways the following day. Our paths naturally split as he was heading north, and I was continuing onward to the west. Before I said goodbye, I was given a word of caution about some of the plains in the surrounding area. Then with a wave and a cheery whistle, Set gathered his herd, storming off and kicking up a cloud of dust in his wake, the way he had arrived. Without the chaos that came about by traveling as a rider in a pack of energetic animals, there was a stark contrast now, simply by walking. Taking in all the sights and sounds again at a simpler pace, I certainly still preferred it. The sandy surroundings stretched on for miles ahead of me. All I had to discern direction with was the blazing sun in the sky, picking my way forward on paths and through dry brushes and small ravines. I came to the flattest part I had seen yet, packed sand in all directions, rocks and boulders scattered amidst divots of packed earth. Walking through the boulders was awe-inspiring, the sheer size of them being intimidating. At times I had lost sight of both the horizon and sun, temporarily leading to lost bearings. It was during one of these moments that I felt as if I were possibly going in circles. So to reorient myself, I clambered with some difficulty up a rock that seemed taller than the rest in the immediate vicinity. From where I stood, I was rewarded with the perfect view of where I was going. And to my relief, I saw that the boulder field was shortly coming to an end in front of me. I had maybe 15 minutes more of trekking before then. Suddenly, though, I felt my feet start to lift. The field of rocks surrounding me were starting to quake and become unseated. One by one in quick succession, they inched their way from the ground. My own previously stable platform began shifting and rocking as I struggled to balance my weight, the slightest movement causing the boulder, many times my weight, to freely rotate. I slid off the side and dropped to the ground with a thud. The stones continued to rise, higher and higher, inch by inch. I knew in this moment that this was probably what I had been warned about, but I was in the thick of it now, and the only way out was forward. Rushing off in the direction I had scouted, the rocks were already a few feet off the ground. A few minutes later they had reached head height, and I could see the whole land laid out in front of me, no obstruction barring my sight. Still, the boulders crept skyward. This went on until the sky above was filled with stone, blocking large chunks of light from the sky and turning the ground into an ominous, shadowy mosaic. Everything stood and suspended, a gentle breeze sweeping by stirring the boulders, causing a visible ripple among them. Then, as if by some universal signal, the floating earth started plummeting back down towards the ground. The first crash was deafening. Another that landed close caused me to stumble and my bones to shake. Thunder was in the air. I ran as fast as I could, looking about all at times, trying to determine if my path would lead to decimation by falling debris. A giant hunk of stone crashed down right in front of me. I threw myself to the side as it rolled with inertia into another already fallen rock, smashing into it and splitting it down the center in a cloud of gravel and smoke. Dust and sand clouded the way, but I pressed on, dark silhouettes from above continuing to bombard the earth. Rounding another fallen rock, I ducked behind just in time when I instinctively heard the hum of a flying shard whoosh past my head. It was too close. And mere minutes after the upset, all the boulders were back resting on the ground, innocently, as if they had always been simply resting there. The only sign of disturbance, a lingering haze of dust in the air. I, for one, was surprised I had survived the ordeal. Any of those rocks would have been enough to end my life in an instant, though there had been no time to think or worry about that in the moment. I picked my way around the fresh craters and rubble, a scene of extreme disorder, until I reached the end, sinking down to my knees in thanks. Fate wasn't done with me in this world yet. Fate wasn't done with me in this world yet. Hopefully I could spend the next few days not having hair-raising occurrences spiking my adrenaline. Such, though, was the price for traveling in untamed land, and I realized why less people were keen on traveling for themselves. Further on, there was a small stream that I found, and it was refreshing to be able to wash up and clean myself. It was as good as a place as any to make camp. After the chores of camp, the rest of the evening was spent writing in my small pocket journal and sketching from memory some of my recent sightings. Then, I put my things away and slept well.